Hi everyone, welcome to this lecture for HSMP 3200 Healthcare Administration. We're going to start out talking about supervisors and managers, just kind of set the background and the foundation for you as we move through the course. So we're going to be talking about the different roles, functions, and job duties and how we differentiate between supervisors and managers. Now there will not be an ongoing lecture for each slide. You guys can go through, read the slides, take your notes as they relate to the book. And I'll be going in and adding some supplemental things to slides every now and then. So if you don't hear a lecture for each slide, that's on purpose. I'm just adding a couple things here and there. So as we move through, the first thing we're going to talk about is just understanding and knowing, we know that the general environment that healthcare is operating in now. It's very busy, very fast-paced, very regulated. But one thing that sets it apart from other industries is it's so dynamic and it's so rapidly changing from day to day, even sometimes from hour to hour, that it can be a little hard to keep up with. We have different things to look at, like our new delivery models that are coming out all the time with our ACOs, our medical homes. We have telemedicine coming out. Extensivists are starting to become very popular. So these new care delivery models that we're seeing, and these are things you're going to hear me say from time to time throughout the course. And if you do find yourself in the healthcare environment, these are things that you're going to hear people say quite frequently, is just how rapidly the environment changes. With the new healthcare law going into effect and still working its way through, we're seeing more and more increase in managed care and how that's functioning. Obviously, regulations, we're seeing more regulations than ever before. And it's interesting to note here that it's been researched, and it's been said that healthcare is the most regulated industry behind nuclear medicine. So we're heavily regulated, from multiple different aspects and multiple different entities. Again, advancing technology, take for example EMRs, drastically changing the way how we're caring for our patients. And we're you may have heard in some other courses or from the environment itself that we're starting to see a shortage in some healthcare professionals, particularly around nursing, but we're seeing shortages in other areas in regards to physicians and those more mid-level practitioners. A lot of them are experiencing some burnouts, and we're experiencing some high turnover, and these are things we're going to talk about later in the course, like I said, just kind of to set the foundation for you as we're moving forward. And so how does our role change as a supervisor? So first, it's important, to understand what it is a supervisor does. Historically, supervisors, just general operations, but especially in healthcare now, what we're seeing is supervisors are becoming more and more responsible for, understanding not just their department-specific tasks and actions that need to be accomplished, but they're responsible now for coordinating these different clinical aspects, these professional and operational changes that are occurring. So just like the healthcare environment itself, for a supervisor to be in healthcare, that's another role that has just increasingly changing and increasingly becoming more and more dynamic. So as we look more again at what exactly a supervisor is, your basic textbook definition is going to define it. Checks on a defined group of workers. So you have you're a director over nursing managers, you're a nurse manager over a unit, you're a supervisor over housekeeping. So the word supervisor and the term supervisor can be very broad, and it comes down to what your defined group of workers are. So you have a defined group of workers that you oversee, as well as your function in the organization as a whole. And the larger organizations that we have, we're going to have more and more layers of supervisors to kind of work up this chain of command. So the two different defining characteristics of a supervisor oversees a group of workers and then their organization, their function within the organization. So there's four basic tenets or four basic dimensions, if you will, of a supervisor and to be a successful supervisor. These are in no particular order. I'd probably switch them around a little. But we'll start with the first one, to be a competent boss or team leader. Now, don't misunderstand. This doesn't mean that you have to know everything or how to do everything or everything about everything. There's so much that it's almost impossible to know how to do everything. And oftentimes that's a really good thing because if you know everything, that can lead to a little bit of micromanagement, which can, lead to a little bit of dip in morale for your particular department or subsector. And these are things we're going to talk about later throughout the course. But just being a competent boss or team leader, having those technical competencies to manage the department and manage your organization, not necessarily that you have to know everything or know how to do everything. Moving on to number two, kind of the reverse of number one, and something that may be a little surprising to some people, but to be a successful supervisor, you also have to be a competent subordinate. You are going to report to somebody. Even the CEO of a healthcare organization reports to the board of directors. So to be a competent subordinate, that entails, being able to receive direction, being humble and teachable. How well do you take constructive criticism and how you do your job? How open-minded are you to change? And how can you kind of handle all these different aspects coming at you in terms of being a competent subordinate? How open-minded can you be? Moving on to number three, serving as that kind of connecting link between your staff and then your one-up or your manager or whoever is above you. You're kind of that link between the two. And this is really important where, as that almost middle person between your higher-ups and your subordinates, that you're not passing the blame on, you're not passing the blame on up to the next level or just saying, I'm just doing it because this is what I'm told to do. You have to take ownership in things and understand that communication is that two-way vehicle. It's important that you're able to take information given to you from your superiors, break it down into its simplest terms and communicate that out to your staff, and vice versa. How do you take information, criticism, ideas, constructive ideas from your staff and run that up the chain of command? So how well you can serve as that connecting link between the two. And then having those working relationships with both your peers and your own superiors, each understanding, part of being a successful supervisor is understanding how each segment, with this focus on healthcare that we're taking, how each segment is so interdependent on each other. For example, nursing floors and nursing units need healthcare because patients aren't going to come to a hospital or healthcare facility that's dirty and nasty. So nurses heavily rely on housekeeping to help keep their units clean and keep them up to par. So part of being in that supervisory role is understanding how interdependent and how each department plays off the other and how interconnected they are and how much they rely on each other. Now, having these great working relationships or these great relationships with your peers and with your superiors and with your own subordinates, again, don't mistake that for meaning that you have to be best friends. What you need to focus on from this aspect is keeping that good professional working relationship. You don't have to be best friends with everyone you work with. It's nice, but, maintaining that you're here for a job, this is what you're here to do, You are unfortunately going to have to make tough decisions sometimes that kind of, may go again, may counter what some of your subordinates are saying. And that's just part of being in that supervisory role. But maintaining those good professional working relationships. So a couple skill sets that supervisors are going to need, and it's going to be essential to their success. People skills. 90% of what you're going to do as a supervisor, regardless, very, very true for healthcare, and I'm sure true for other industries as well. 90% of what you're going to do is dealing with people. So from a healthcare aspect, think about all the people that a supervisor would come into contact with. You have patients, you have families, you have your own staff, you have other department heads or other department supervisors, you have vendors, with your supplies, you have the community. So you have to be able to know how to work with and balance how you communicate with people inside your organization, people outside of your organization, how well you can kind of cultivate those interpersonal relationships and interpersonal people skills that you need to be a successful supervisor. Technical skills, fairly explanatory, and then talking about conceptual and decision-making skills. It's going to be very, very important as a supervisor. If you think about the structure and the chain of command, supervisors need to be able to see the bigger picture, right? So you're going to have to take yourself out, get out of the weeds, for lack of a better term, and see that overarching bigger picture on what's going on. How do you not just survive as an organization, especially if you're in this more leadership type role? You're going to have to do a little forward thinking into how do you not just survive but thrive in this environment, because like we said at the very beginning, we have new delivery models, reimbursement changes, we have technology that's changing daily, different reimbursement structures coming through, increased regulation. So how do we continue to not just survive but thrive? So as a supervisor, you have to get really good at your decision-making skills, because that's essentially what you're being paid to do. You're being paid to make these important decisions. So every position comes with a couple, with challenges, regardless of where you work or what kind of position you take, and supervisory roles are no different. So supervisory roles are going to have a couple of challenges associated with them, and understanding, particularly in healthcare, you're almost on a dual track of leadership for a supervisor. So you have administrative leadership, which is, all your department heads, housekeeping, nursing, environmental services, things like that. But then you have your medical staff. And this can probably, people will tell you this is probably one of the more challenging aspects of being a supervisor, because these are highly educated leaders themselves. So you're not just leading subordinates, you're not just leading people in your department, you're leading other leaders. So it's challenging to understand how to, make that balance there. And then making decisions, you're making decisions as a supervisor in healthcare. It's not just like going to your retail store and, making a decision on what to price something for the day. You're making decisions here that can affect patients' lives. So you're making decisions that are going to affect, a patient's life, their quality of life, their family's life. So you have to be really quick on your feet. And this is why, going back to the previous slide, cultivating those decision-making skills are going to be very important, because you're dealing, depending on what role you take here as a supervisor, you can be dealing with life and death decisions here. So it's really important to kind of hone in on those decision-making skills and getting them firmed up and ironed out. So we've talked a little bit about supervisory roles, and we're going to switch over to talk about, what is management and what does that concept mean. The most important thing here to understand is you manage things and you lead people. So don't, you manage your checkbook or you manage your budget, but people are led. People are not managed. And so part of being in this management role is understanding that it's going to be your job to motivate people who report to you to kind of push us all towards this common objective that we all have. So like I said a couple slides ago, managers, you don't manage people, you lead people. So this is kind of counterintuitive to what I just said. But managers, you're managing a workforce. You're managing a set group of people. And these are the things you need to have a really firm understanding of in terms of how a manager functions. So you're over the workforce, your technology, your facilities, money, your budgets. So just understanding these are the different concepts that as a manager you need to have that more firm understanding of. In regards to your technical skills, you need to understand, knowing how not only to perform tasks in your own department, but how that department, take yourself outside your department and understand how that department fits in this grand scheme of the continuum of care. What part does your department play, or the people who report to you play, in terms of the continuum of patient care, and where do you kind of fit into that mold? And HR skills, again, like we said earlier, 90% of what you're doing as a manager or supervisor is going to be dealing with people. So working on those interpersonal skills, those people skills, is going to be essential to being successful in this type of leadership role. Now, conceptual skills, like we covered, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself, and you don't want to have a very centric view of how you function. Again, understanding that interdependency that each department has on the other. One department can't just work in silo. We're all in this together. So how do we kind of work to make this successful for the organization, the team member, and ultimately our patients, keeping our patients at the forefront. How do we work together to provide them quality of care? Some foundation functions of management. This is what the entire course is going to be built around. So there's a couple different foundational functions. There's planning, organizing, staffing, influencing, and controlling. And these are going to be functions that you need to be intimately familiar with as an administrator. And again, we're building the course around these different concepts, so we'll be talking about them throughout the semester. So we'll finish up today, or this particular lecture, talking about authority. And we're going to be talking in regards to authority throughout the semester and how that relates to being a servant leader and what that means. But the textbook definition in your textbooks will define this as the right to act and to direct others. Understanding, authority is a position. It's not an individual, because people come and go. People move in and out of these positions all the time. The authority is given to the position, and not the individual. And unfortunately, some people will see that in a different light and take that as authority given to an individual instead of the position overall. So people who are going to be following you, they need to trust you. They need to trust your authority. So not, for lack of a better term, not letting it go to your head. The authority is given to the position and not the individual. And that's an important concept to understand in terms of managing and supervising people from an administrative standpoint, how you kind of balance that. We'll finish up with responsibility. Now this is one, delegating skills, very, very important, particularly in an administrative type role, which we'll be covering, throughout the semester. But understand here with responsibility, you can't delegate out responsibility. You can delegate out tasks, you can delegate out actions, but at the end of the day, as the administrator, as the supervisor, as the manager, you are still ultimately responsible for the work, for the outcome, for any issues that you encounter. You cannot delegate out responsibility. So it's going to stay with the person who was originally assigned the task or the objective. And this is why delegating out the tasks at hand are extremely important, because as the supervisor, the person in that supervisory role, you still are ultimately responsible. Guys, that's going to conclude us for this particular lecture covering supervisors and managers. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you.